Okay, this is the Mi Mix 2S, and its aluminium and ceramic design means the phone hits the ground running. It's not a thick phone, but it is decidedly weighty. It has a seamless, uninterrupted body, and the materials make it feel every bit as expensive as its rivals. But it's also slippery beyond measure. You're gonna need to keep an eye on this one. There is still no headphone jack and no water-resistant certification. But this time round, Xiaomi has introduced wireless charging. It is about time. There's also a pretty great fingerprint scanner on the back. It's well positioned, easy to locate, and not to mention, fast. Hearing the words of Lei Jun talking about how the iPhone X was considered the best phone has made it pretty clear that this is what the Mix 2S was built to compete against. And if this wasn't evidence enough, I'm sure the software will clear things up a bit. Turning on the full screen mode creates what I would say is the closest you can get to an iPhone X on Android. You can swipe up from the bottom to exit an app, and just like Apple's offering, you can swipe up and hold for multitasking. The resemblance is uncanny, to say the least, but it does work surprisingly well here, considering this is not a feature that is baked into Android. You can also swipe to the left of an app to go back, and combining these gestures means you barely even miss the navigation bar. It's a really great system. Aside from this, we're packing MIUI 9.5, based on Android 8.0, and it's a beautifully animated bit of software. It feels part Apple, part Huawei, and it's a very customizable affair, but you might not like how stark the contrast is from stock Android's material design. But that's personal preference. Now, before we get to the camera, you need to know, in terms of raw power, the Mix 2S is a beast. It pairs the Snapdragon 845 with 6 or 8 gigs of RAM, and with the 8GB RAM model, you'll be reaching new heights on most benchmarks. Obviously, this isn't relevant to most users, but you'll be happy to know it translates rather well into real-world usage. The phone zips through any task I can throw at it, and everything from the multitasking to the gaming performance is as fluid as it is responsive. It's a joy to use. There are no SD cards here, but you really don't miss it because the top spec model comes with an extremely generous 256 gigs of internal storage. If being inspired by the iPhone was in any way in question, the camera arrangement of the Mix 2S should quell those doubts. It has now been shifted to the left, and for the first time in this series, we've got a dual camera arrangement. Whilst not a disaster, this does introduce some wobble when placed on a flat surface. I would have rather they just kept it in the middle of the phone. But this is exciting. You might have heard of Xiaomi's Mi A1, which has become prolific in a very short period of time, primarily because it has the best dual camera setup on a budget phone. And if the company can do that kind of wizardry on a $200 device, it makes you wonder what they can do on a $500 one. So, two lenses, one is a wide angle, one is a telephoto, and this is not an uncommon arrangement for a smartphone camera, but in this case, Xiaomi claims this is the best camera they've ever produced on a phone. And they're not wrong. This is the best camera you can find on a Xiaomi smartphone, but that doesn't mean it's one of the better cameras out there. In ideal situations, it's good. Really good. The 12 megapixel sensor gets you detailed photos with great dynamic range, and the portrait mode edge detection is the best we've seen from the company. Regrettably, it's downhill from there. Upon zooming, you can't focus on close objects. It's prone to blurring if you're not holding the phone steady, and the f1.8 aperture means it's more sensitive to low light than the competition. Dim lighting is made very apparent by the softness of its low light photos, and portrait mode is no longer effective in anything below average lighting conditions. Understandably, it's less capable than the top-tier Galaxy S9 in this area, but unfortunately, it mostly falls short of last year's S8 II. To reiterate, this is not a bad camera, and at its best, a rather good one. It's just not reliable enough to trump the iPhone it is targeting. Flicking round to the front leaves a bit of a sour taste in the mouth. It's got a 5 megapixel camera, and not unlike Huawei's, does far too much face beautification, even when the mode is turned off. The detail is acceptable for what most people use their front cameras for, but you'll probably find yourself turning the device upside down just to avoid getting your thumb in your selfies. This is an inconvenience. A couple of other things to bear in mind regarding the camera. With the Mix 2S, Xiaomi has added AI scene detection, which detects the object you're shooting and adjusts colors and contrast accordingly. It can be nice, but it also can be pretty unwelcome, so I tend to turn it off and color my photos myself. What is cool though is the stabilize feature, which is essentially real-time, live cropping into your photo to make sure the end result turns out completely aligned. The phone's video taking capabilities are a bit of a mixed bag. At 1080p you get beautiful, stabilized, steady footage, but scaling that up to 4K and optical image stabilization is turned off, and the resulting electronic image stabilization just isn't quite up to scratch. So the camera is a little bit underwhelming. Promising to be one of the big iPhone killer features, it ends up just being an iterative upgrade to the Mix 2, which, given the 6 months or so gap between these two phones, hasn't made it much better compared to its ever-improving rivals. The screen is nearly identical to the Mix 2. We've got a 5.99-inch Full HD Plus LCD. It's got slightly less around it, which gives it a marginally better screen-to-body ratio, but you will struggle to tell the difference. And to say one thing, the screen isn't bad. In fact, I'd say it's a little bit better than it sounds on paper, but even the cheaper OnePlus 5T is far more vibrant. And whilst this phone does have the so-called bezel-less form factor, it's much less impressive than it was a year and a half ago when we saw the original Mix. The competition has got so much better in this time, and the 2S actually has a lower screen-to-body ratio than its own 2016 counterpart. As with most other smartphones now, the earpiece is combined with the downwards firing speaker to create this pseudo dual speaker setup, which is good. It's nothing surprising or exciting, but nonetheless solid and an appreciated improvement. The battery is good though. The capacity sits at 3,400 mAh, which is just above average, and this is what you can expect from its performance. It also supports Qualcomm's Quick Charge 3, which makes it a little faster at charging than phones like the S9. Alright, so where does all of this leave us? Xiaomi's Mi Mix 2S is Beauty and the Beast rolled into one package. Its carefully thought out software and gesture-based navigation is a slick, intuitive experience, and we've got a battery to match. It's therefore a real shame that the camera and display are away behind Google or Samsung's offerings, but this doesn't prevent it from being a strong competitor in 2018, especially when you factor in the price. Alright guys, I really do hope you enjoyed the video, and if you are new to the channel, if you could smash that subscribe button down below, that would really mean a lot to me. With that being said,